Welcome to Dreams for Society series, presented in 3 parts by Lisa Hayes and Iva Nasr.
This series is a call to action to imagine, visualize, and create.
With every recorded interview and conversation, we have a text description below every video, timestamp links to specific segments in each video, and more detailed contact information. I'm Iva Nasr, mentor, speaker, author. Find me at ivanasr.com.
And I'm Lisa Hayes, transformational life coach, speaker, author. Find me at dreamsforsociety.com and dreamsforyoucoaching.com. Thank you for joining us. Please enjoy and share this series. Hi, dear dreamers. I'm Lisa Hayes, your host for Dreams for Society, where we imagine, visualize, and create. Today is February the 4th, 2021. It's with absolute delight that I have this opportunity to interview Iva Nasr on Dreams for Society. This is part 2 of our 3-part series. Last week, Iva interviewed me in part 1, and you can find that on this channel, as well as turning on the notifications bell if you want to be notified when we post part 3. When Iva interviewed me last week, it was such an honor and so much fun. Her questions evoked in me a clear understanding of my life journey. I hope to do the same for you, Iva, today. Iva and I have clocked many hiking hours, pondering the magic and wizardry of life, so it is always wonderful to receive more insight from our discussions. So I'm so looking forward to this today. And so fitting that our show today is about Iva's magical experiences and her journey from war to miracles. And we are in for a treat, dear dreamers. Before we start the interview, I would like to share highlights of Iva's background, her services, and gifts. Iva Nasr is a teacher, seer, mentor, and author. In her anecdotal and lighthearted way, Iva guides a modern mind. Open up, align, focus, shine. Her private intuitive readings, classes, ongoing dialogues, and life testimonials give hope and inspire mind expansion and action. Iva's book, From Rifles to Roses, Memories and Miracles, has gained a worldwide audience. Her friend and colleague, Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love, wrote a beautiful foreword in Iva's book and joined her at her book launch in Indianapolis. I had the pleasure to attend that book launch, and it drew a sizable and impressive crowd. I was looking around at everybody and I thought, I could just stay here the rest of my life with these people. They were all just so beautiful. Liz and Iva took the stage and shared their friendship. It was so obvious and evident how much they care for each other. And they also shared their wisdom with us. It was a magical night indeed, and I could feel Iva's light and joy uplifting all of us there that night. You may find Iva and also get a copy of her book, From Rifles to Roses, Memories and Miracles, at ivanasr.com. Now, over the years, Iva made a commitment to a neutrality in her mind, which allows her to create and activate her own powers of perception and to shape her own reality to what she is to life and her brethren. This focus has led to grueling growth and amazing experiences, each a roadmap to remarkable change. Her greatest satisfaction comes from sharing this potential with anyone and anything willing to join this ride, soaring beyond limitations to discover the impossible. As Iva teaches, our minds at their highest resonance create miracles. So, with that, dear dreamers, it's such a pleasure to begin our conversation today with Iva and receive through her voice the light and joy she shines outward to us all. Welcome, Iva.
Hello, Lisa. Thank you so much. I have to say, your words and your voice and love and your introduction take my breath away. Like literally, right now, I feel like I just need to take this big, deep breath because whatever we're about to embark on feels phenomenal. And I often joke and say, enter at your own risk into this world that we're about to share with everyone. So here we are. Thank you so much.
Well, with that, enter at your own risk. Are you ready for question one? Da, da, da.
I'm the one. Yes, let's go for it.
Well, it's occurred to me that, we've had many hiking talks, Iva, and we walk our talk when we go on hikes, don't we?
We sure do. Yes.
And, through our many, many chats, I've really grown to know you and admire you. However, I just marvel over what it must have been like growing up during the war in Lebanon. That just seems so surreal to me. However, you found magic despite what was going on around you. Would you share with the listeners something in your book that you wrote? And even if you're up for it, I'd love for you to read it, those few pages, where you found magic on the walls of the bomb shelter in Beirut as you danced with the candle flame.
Hmm. I want to make a quick comment, Lisa, before I read this story, and I gladly will, that I'm always very, very aware and sensitive when I am talking about myself and especially about the war aspect of that I grew up in, that I'm always very aware that this was my war on the outside of the home, but there are also many people who, as we speak, might be experiencing hardships and challenges, and sometimes that war is on the inside of the home. So I just like to acknowledge up front that I'm very, very aware that when I share my story, it is to share my voice and to inspire change, I hope, and also as a testament of empathy and kind of this communal experience that helps us go, move through life and make changes and grow and evolve. So, on that note, this candle flame anecdote in my book is one that continues to come to life with more insight and wisdom. I will read the entire story, so please just enjoy the transportation into that moment with me. Candle flame, Beirut, Lebanon, several years later. The city's emergency sirens consumed me with a numbing fear that echoed in my entire body. It was dusk. I sat in a corner of the bomb shelter with haunting images of the outside world collapsing. I tried to imagine the sunset and the familiar ebb and flow of ocean waves. I tried to recall the fun and frolic of the school playground just hours earlier that day. I could not hold on to those images. Panic paralyzed me instead. My heart pounded in my ears. My chest was hollow, my feet ice cold. I braced myself against the frigid concrete wall. I was lost in this chaos. I closed my eyes with an instinctive plea, an automatic prayer for help. I'm not sure how much time passed, but eventually I succumbed. As I unclenched my jaw, I noticed there was a rhythm to the bombs falling. They began to sound like the drumming of a giant spirit warrior calling all to council. Oddly enough, this rhythm soothed me. I began to relax. I looked around the room. Several families that lived in the same building sought refuge in this inferno of safety. Huddled in one part of the room were mostly the men, listening to the news on a battery-powered radio, anticipating the broadcast of cease fire, as temporary as that cessation might turn out to be. It was a big question mark. In another corner were some mothers that gracefully held their martyr calm as they talked and listened. You could see the trepidation in their eyes as they glanced over to the children. Toddlers huddled with their mothers or fathers. Other children, as most do, made an adventure of the day the best they could. They crouched in a circle around board games like chess, Monopoly, Mastermind, and Risk. Yes, games of strategy and takeover in the midst of this battle-lit scene. I sat watching, stripped of innocence in this dim cave of uncertainty, in the vibrational echoes of my heartbeats, the newscaster's foreboding voice, the explosions outside, the chatter, the children's banter. I wondered, will I live or will I die? The electricity was out. Oil lanterns, candles, and flashlights lit the shelter. I pondered in deep silence as I gazed at the white candle burning in front of me. All of a sudden, I felt this bizarre separation from my body. My eyes softened as I melted into the flame of the candle. It was unique and surreal to anything I had ever experienced. My shallow breathing relaxed to deeper inhalations. My mind went to calm as my eyes followed the flame that was now floating, unattached, to its cradle. This little glow danced around the room, magnetizing my gaze. Was it leading me, or did I carry it into this magical sphere within the cold darkness? Doesn't matter. We were in sync. The more I softened, the more we blended to a force that was separate from either of us. This magnetic energy orchestrated the path. The most unexplainable peace washed over me. I had a glimpse, a flash of wisdom to the power of my mind and the expanse of the universe across all time and space and beyond. I was elated in this tranquility and simultaneously juxtaposed to the canvas of war. The flame gracefully returned to its cradle wick and whispered to me auspiciously, "You will live." It was a discreet whisper that was quickly interrupted with doubt as the sounds of war and shattering glass jolted me again. My vision was different, though, as if more light shone through my eyes now. They cast a subtle glow everywhere I looked. I surveyed the room once again, this time, noticing our supplies of canned food and bottled water, stashes of blankets, batteries, candles, and matches, our bags each with modest contents of necessities and valuables. Everything else left behind in the mystery of the world above us, in our apartments and homes that also sat in their own uncertainty, awaiting their own destinies. In a split second of alarm, when we ran to the shelter, I had carried my teddy bear with me, fearing for my other fuzzy friends left behind, but I could only take one. My parents' valuables were our passports, other important documents, and cash on hand. A few school books came along as well, if remembered in the frenzied flight to safety. I reached over for my teddy, and she looked transformed. Did she see what happened with the candle flame? This seemingly inanimate companion has an assertive, regal presence. We were equal and became leaders of the pack. Yes, leaders of the pack to all my other stuffed animals and dolls. I, the one mostly talking, and she mostly listening in the most sophisticated and respectful way. I'm saying mostly listening because she has had things to say occasionally, as have the rest of my furry pack. I am aware that these conversations were partial imagination and child's play, but not entirely. Every so often, their ethereal voices carried over in a manner that gave me goosebumps. I never questioned the realness of these moments. They commanded my attention beyond the playful pretend. And if I ever accidentally stepped on one of them, I cradled them and empathized their pain as my mother or father would for mine, because I saw life in them. If they spoke, they gave very good advice. They told me of other times and lands. Occasionally, I would see my grandfather or other spirits with them. We made each other laugh. They especially enjoyed my acrobatic stunts. They sat so supportively still as I mastered somersaults and headstands. Teddy, still living with me to this day, grabs my attention every time I pass her by. My body naturally bends into a humble bow. Like I mentioned, she has a queen like regal air about her. I scratch her head and hold her tight as our heartbeats caress. I hear her gentle calls even when I am away from home. In the shelter, transported by the candle flame, I nodded off in the same corner that was now partial sanctuary. I woke up just before dawn to cease fire, finally declared through the airwaves. You would think there would be only hurrays of joy and relief coming from everyone. Actually, a myriad of reactions surfaced with this news of truce. I saw some tears of submission and gratitude. Many shouts of obscenities from adults filled the rancid air. They could not tolerate the injustice and short sightedness of the warring militias and nations that invade human rights with such arrogance and misplaced power. In this display of passionate reactions, I understood that the contained and compressed silence of the hours of captivity was merely a muted attempt to otherwise boiling and raging yells of riot. I remember clearly that day. I was given the gift of contrast. A candle flame and an angel helped me touch bliss. They carried me on the wings of harmony. Rage and purity were now in the alchemy of my mind. Straight out of a well rehearsed scene of a play, we once again put out the candles, reorganized games and supplies in their delegated corners, did an inventory to later replenish what had been used, grabbed our valuables and bags, and dutifully marched up the stairs, resurfacing to the outside world. We waved goodbye at every landing, numbers dwindling as the last few reached the 13th floor. We lived on the second floor. Shukran, Allah makum, thank you, God be with you, we exchanged as we smiled at each other, weary and in solidarity of human kindness, elders and children alike. Neighbors had an extra special meaning during the war years. This survival based bond was fortified by a part of the world that has always extended a cultural training of neighborly gestures and offers of extreme generosity, of welcome, food, and support. We came from all walks of life, of religions, nationalities, and lifestyles. It is by far one of my biggest blessings to have grown up in this environment. My parents taught me all inclusiveness and non discrimination and swayed my mind from hate and judgment as often as possible. And with this healthy household came a culture that, despite its own shadows of conflict and war, ingrained a giving to life and a celebration that I cannot explain in words. All I can say is that these lessons and models have been part of my saving grace over the years. These gifts were more feathers on the wings of harmony. Every time we returned home after hours of hiding underground, the experience was the same, yet different, like a virginal rite of passage. The routine was to first survey the apartment, any shattered glass, any fires, damage, or thefts, and then immediate gratitude for what was intact and untouched. Some of us felt a wave of grace and protection, and others thankful because it could have been worse, and more importantly, everyone was safe. Some neighbors were not so lucky. We would later console their harsh and bloody loss. This time, we stepped into a mess. We opened the apartment door only to step into a mist and a thick layer of yellow debris on the floors, carpets, and every surface. A few rockets had hit our building. One of them exploded in the only stairwell of the building. Apparently, we had just missed its aimless target by sheer minutes when we had swiftly spiraled our way down to the shelter. Others knocked big holes in walls throughout the building, exploding into shrapnels everywhere. Even the tiniest, most minute metal shrapnel cuts into flesh or object with no mercy. For days, we were discovering damage from tiny shrapnel in the oddest places. A casserole dish shattered in a cupboard, or art on the wall nicked. I was not particularly happy when I reached for a brand new box of cereal, Lucky Charms to be exact, to find it ridden with little holes. I had negotiated with my dad at the grocery store to buy it for me. It had been a prize. Nothing would talk my mom into letting me still eat from this box, even after I promised to sift through my bowl and pick out the shrapnel. Even my Lucky Charms sacrificed. Damn this war. Except for the nasty bomb powder, my desk in the bedroom was as I left it when I was whisked to safety hours prior. It was daylight and a school day. No radio broadcast that school was closed. I dusted off the debris and packed my books. Life went on. Our teachers made excuses for us very sparingly. Was it part of the protocol of good education to prepare us for anything in life? How to achieve and succeed despite all hurdles and adversity? Anyway, I showed up, performed, executed, learned, regurgitated an excellent education. War days or snow days, what's the difference? I had a math quiz that morning. Off to school I went, and to ballet lesson that evening. One time, I showed up to school as usual after another invasion. Yahya, my friend, who sat to my right in class, was not there. It was a round table. His seat was emptier than usual. I shudder as I recall this frozen moment. I never saw him again. He died in a crossfire. Yahya, from the Arabic verb meaning alive or to live.
Wow. So powerful. So powerful. I just, I said it was surreal, and I just can't imagine. War days versus snow days. What's the difference? The bomb powder and shrapnel in your apartment. Oh my goodness. I've, what also struck me was your inner knowing at that young age that gave you the guidance on how to use your alchemy powers, how to go from the bomb shelter to school, to find the magic in the midst of war and fear and the obstruction of civil liberties when you danced with the candle flame. Truly, what gift you were given as a child to know how to use your alchemy powers has certainly served you throughout your life. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Part of it naturally was, maybe the gift that I was born with in this life. And also, how I was raised and the values that my parents instilled in me and my siblings, and how to have a positive outlook in life, and all of these things I'm sure factor in. The one thing that was so clear to me at that young age, at that specific, in that specific experience with the candle flame, I remember that day so clearly that I knew right away that it was not a fantasy or an optical illusion. It was truly my first tangible, memorable experience of transcendence to a lighter realm where, like, these gateways open up to angelic presence, especially when there was such a contrast of that environment in the shelter with the sounds of war just like pounding. So that's what impressed me most, and why it was so important for me to demonstrate, the evolution of my spirit as a child growing up in the war. So this moment became definitely a landmark moment where I would many times in my life refer to it. That gives me the reminder of contrast, that two realities can be happening at the same time, and it depends on the choice we make, where we direct our attention. And you and I, Lisa, this is a big part of what has brought us together into this series, to share these conversations of how we've made pretty radical changes in our lives, and emphasizing the power and beauty of choice, and the power to create with love, and how to tune, like you mentioned in your interview, in part one. There's a dial, like a radio dial. You can tune in. You can choose what channel to tune to that predisposes the outlook and thoughts, actions. So that moment with the candle flame was truly a saving grace, and it left a permanent imprint on me, in the power of that choice and experience.
I can attest to that, knowing you like I do. Using that knowledge throughout your life. Just amazing. That we can go into a little bit about, just not the memories of war that occurred when you were a child, but also memories of Mowgli, the candy maker, all these fun things. Talk a little
Yes,
bit about those.
yes, I made a lot of BFFs, best friends forever. Growing up, I still do. That realm of not just imagination, but just visitors and friends from other dimensions and realities. That's a constant thing for me in my life. Uh, at the time, though, uh, when I wrote my book, Lisa, um, it was very clear to me that if I am to write anything about the war and being a child of war growing up, that it would absolutely have to represent the perspective and the mind that is me today.
Mm.
And so that's why I started the book with Mowgli and the Candy Maker. Very real experiences, but it's a very different introduction than to open up with a scene uh, on the battleground, you know? So the experience with, and I'm going to let the listeners and readers, if they're curious enough to know why Mowgli and the Candy Maker, I'm going to leave that up to them to read a little bit more about them. But when we have when you choose to remember, okay, let me put it this way. Some memories and experiences we have in life can dominate, can define who you are or who you think you are based on what you're remembering and what you went through. But if you then expand the curiosity and you ask for other memories to resurface that were likely to have happened simultaneously but were hidden or forgotten, those start coming back. And that's exactly what happened to me when I finally said yes to the kind of divine invitation to write a book and to share my story. When I put myself in that zone through the eyes of the alchemist, the wizard, the one who understands all possibilities, the one who's experienced miracles and has had mystical experiences over the years, I wanted to remember my story of the war and my childhood through that frequency spectrum, through that vibrational triggers. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, there's Mowgli. And there's that experience with the candy maker. And then, oh, that's right, that transcendent moment with the candle flame in the shelter. And then it grew from there. I don't know if this makes, if I'm
It made,
explaining myself
oh my goodness,
completely
it
on
makes
this.
total sense. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're able, and you were able when you wrote your book, to reflect on the experiences in your life, the memories that you have in your mind, and bring in that moment a frequency of at least neutrality. And I mean, because knowing you're not walking around with a chip on your shoulder and just continually traumatized. I just have to bring up one other quick thing that must exemplify how you do this. I mean, to the listeners, if they read your book, and I won't go into any of the details, but as a child in Beirut, you witnessed a brutal kidnapping from the safety of your parents' balcony. And I won't go into the details. You guys can read it. It was traumatic, I'm sure. How are you able, Iva, to remember that and even write about it in your book without feeling traumatized in the moment as you remember it?
Well, in order to have written it with the transparency and truth that I was feeling, I did relive those moments. However, like I said, I had cast almost like this a sphere of light around me. I invoked the best of myself. I told the story from both the wizard and the child of war. And when I was in a moment of telling a certain incident, like the one you mentioned with the kidnapping, which absolutely was traumatizing, it had me like I was gripped by fear for days, walking around, just anticipating that kind of, surprise kidnapping. Who wants to have that kind of imprint, define the rest of their lives. So those things stayed with me for a long time. However, again, like just to emphasize that when we choose, the power of choice, Lisa, and then with that the power to create with imagination and love and understanding human potential and actualizing that potential, like all of these and powerful realities are just as real as those other experiences and memories. So I was able to relive the moments, not deny, definitely not suppress. However, I gave life, a new life, to those experiences. I literally rewrote my history. It's no longer the same story. And then the other very, very, very deciding moment in my life, specifically to what we're talking about, you know, like to be able to come from a place of neutrality. And just as a side note, neutrality is not inaction. Neutrality is a pause that we give ourselves. It's almost like a 2-second pause between thoughts so that you have a choice where you're going to direct the next thought or action. It's a pause that brings more precision, that keeps the heart and mind working together, for example, and so on and so forth. So neutrality is a pause, a breath that allows a more deliberate reaction or response to something. But the deciding moment that really, really helped me and really turned things around in how I moved forward and how I overcame fears and traumas and phobias from the war and whatnot was the moment years forward from that when I was in Boone, North Carolina, and I was invited to share a sermon on Easter Sunday as a guest, you know, speaker. And long story short, the one point that ties into what we're talking about is that in preparation for that speech, that presentation, I decided right then and there that I no longer introduce myself as, hi, my name is Iva. I grew up in a war. I decided to release my identity with the child of war. It doesn't mean I'm discounting it or, as they say, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Like it's not, but it shifted my focus. That if I am going to introduce myself to someone who's meeting me for the first time, let's say, it makes a difference when I say, hi, I'm Iva. I'm a wizard. I'm a miracle maker. I'm a light being. I love miracles and I facilitate them for others, and et cetera, versus saying, hi, my name is Iva. I grew up in a war. It sets a very different tone. And this example, we can apply to so many other things. It's exactly the essence of why I'm doing the work that I do these days in like inspiring a new perspective and a new paradigm of feeling and thinking, not necessarily new like I'm inventing it, but to give someone a choice, right? Where your mind goes, what's your identity, who are you, what have you been, but are you really remembering the entire story, or are you focused on just one aspect of it? Just stimulating questions where we get to see, are we still attached to an old identity? Can we let go of the drama? Are we ready to heal? And then beyond healing, then you start seeing that, wow, I'm a multidimensional being. There's so much more to this. There's an entire universe and galaxies upon galaxies. If I can access energy and if I have a choice, will I choose just those experiences? So the bravery, the courage to make the choice to heal and then to believe that and understand, not even like go beyond beliefs, to understand that we are miracle workers. And we can talk more about what that really means if you want to in a little while. But that's the point, right? So you asked me about what it must have been like to witness that kidnapping, or to sit in the darkness of a bomb shelter. I can, in a blink of an eye, go back into those moments, and I can feel my heart beating, and I can recall a very limited experience that way, or not.
Mm. I love how you're able to rewrite your past, your memories, let go of the identities that no longer serve you, and find magic no matter the situation. How powerful, Iva. And I know that that is the reason why you wanted to write your book. And before we go on to some of the beautiful miracles that have occurred to you, also additional miracles, I should say, that have happened in your life once you crossed continents and came to America, is there anything else you want to talk about related to the title of your book, From Rifles to Roses, Memories and Miracles? What else about that book that you'd like the listeners to know?
Yeah, basically, this is a good segue from what we were just talking about. And I'll keep this very brief, and it's very simple. From Rifles to Roses is a three-layered meaning. The first is literal. I grew up in a war and progressed more or less to more peace. Peace these days is relative, but from, like that part of, that specifically to my story, yes, from Rifles to Roses. And there's actually a scene in my book where I actually was sitting on a stack of rifles, and so on and so forth. So there's, like a specific reference to that. So the first layer is From Rifles to Roses, war to peace, personal story. Then the other layer, the second layer, is what we were just talking about, mindset. What lens are you going to put on the camera of your mind? Is it the more rifled or the rosier? I'm not going to go too much more into it because I think point made for now. And then the third meaning is the call to action, the collaboration on a collective level, paradigm shift. Paradigm means patterns, change in patterns in how we coexist, how we respond, what we put out in the world, what we take from it, what we put out to the universe, what we take from it. Okay, so many thought leaders and change makers probably refer to this shift as the new world order or the new earth, but it's the call to action. It's an invitation for change, for reform, for collaboration, and most importantly, and maybe first and foremost, for dialogue.
Mm.
Memories and miracles, again, we'll go into that, into like maybe more of a demonstration with it, but that maybe speaks for itself, that I'm emphasizing that that my memories and the way I'm telling the story was channeled through that choice for imagination and miracles.
Mm. I'm always amazed at how parallel a lot of our journey is, even though I didn't have the war experience. We've kind of come out at the other end the same way. It's just lovely.
I know. Oh my goodness. I I love how different we are, yet how meticulously the same we are too.
Yeah.
And we probably model like this, what this friendship and collaboration, and like where the parallels are. I can only imagine parallel the same thing for people and friends out there too.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait if we could go on to another portion of this interview regarding at least one of the miracle experiences that mirrored that special time in your life where you crossed the big pond from Lebanon to America. And can you share with us about how old you were when you came to America and maybe what you thought of America in your first impression, and then segue into one of your magical miracle experiences that you had here?
Yes, boy, you're really asking some very simple, light questions today, Lisa. Oh, okay. So I was, um, I, in the typical, on the like typical scale of how old someone is when they start grade school and then middle school and high school in general, um, I was always younger than the typical age group. And that doesn't matter anyway, because age is relative. I am not going to go into that testimony of what that means to me right now, but it's something that I write about and is very significant choice that I've made not to acknowledge my age in the typical way. So having said this, when we came, well, my parents had already had more than foot in the door, because when they were college students themselves, young lovebirds and progressing with their education and life, they had been at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, back and forth. And fast forward, now they're starting a family. Fast forward, now I'm in the picture. Fast forward, now we're possibly moving to the US again. And at the time, my two older siblings were further along, like in their college education. So they were coming specifically for that, to continue in colleges somewhere in the US. At the time, I was supposed to just have 1 year kind of as away from high school in Lebanon, to come and be with everyone. And my parents will help settle my siblings. And then my parents and I would go back to Beirut, and I would, continue my education there until one day I decided if I wanted the same thing myself. But that 1 year became, until today, that ended up being my move to the US, not knowing. So I didn't have, again, the typical finality or farewell with my life and my friends and in Beirut and Lebanon. So that at the time set a tone. Again, it's another example. Do I look back at that and dwell on how it happened, or bring in my the knowing that everything happens for a reason, and those reasons can be co-created into a phenomenal opportunity. All right. So at the time, I was still in between, like adjusting. So the experiences that then I started having really helped give me, that clear, contrast. You could focus on this, or here, we'll toss you this miraculous experience. We'll give you this little mystical moment. The one that really stands out right now, which became a culmination of so many other experiences building up to it, is the experience I had in Kihei, sunny Kihei, Hawaii. So when we moved to the US, I would have been finishing high school and then, going into college around that time. And then I graduated college and had started getting into the healing arts. And I decided to take a month to go to Hawaii. I gave myself a sabbatical. And the theme for that sabbatical was breath. I wanted to go and just focus on breath and breathing for a month. And what better beautiful creature than the dolphin to be my inspiration, because dolphins have to actively surface to breathe. And they have to deliberately stay underwater and not breathe when they're ready to transition. Long story short, my dream was to swim with the dolphins in the wild, kind of on their own terms, not to buy a ticket and get on a boat, with barbecue and sightings of dolphins. I didn't want that experience. I wanted, if it was meant to happen, I wanted it to happen in the wild with them. The entire month came to pass, and now I was on the last day of my stay on the island. And I had made peace that I was not meant to be with the dolphins in the water, but I had connected with them. I had developed a lot of my telepathic abilities in that month. There's a lot that went into the mechanics of why I went to Hawaii and what I did and how I worked with the breath. And, it's a big, 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 big story. But one of the mechanics that I was beginning to understand and wanted to master is how to set a clear intention for something, how to have a goal, and then simultaneously have no attachment to the outcome. That is the secret to the best of manifestations and to the prerequisites a lot of times for what we might call a miracle. That's not a all-inclusive or conclusive statement, but it's part of it. So I had genuinely let go of the attachment and felt deep gratitude instead for everything else. The night before I was supposed to leave, a friend gave me a lead to a guide. He was a beautiful Guatemalan man who takes people out in kayaks, to possibly find the dolphins. He knows general spots where pods come and so on and so forth. Okay, so fast forward, I called him late at night, went to a payphone. That's before, I had the iPhone in my pocket. I went to a payphone and I called him and I said, is there any chance? I'm leaving like in a day and a half. And he said, actually, I'm taking a group out first thing tomorrow morning, but you're going to have to share a kayak with me, a two-person kayak, because the rest are rented. And I was relieved because I'm like, I don't want to be in a kayak by myself. I mean, I was already confronting several insecurities and fears, and venturing into this in the first place. So I said, no, that's perfect. He said, okay, you're going to have to meet me like 3 a.m. if you're going to ride with me to go to the spot, to the shore on the island where we are likely to see the dolphins. I said, no problem. So here I am, middle of the night, on my bike, going to meet this stranger in a parking lot with a truck full of kayaks, and to go on this adventure. And all of this was guided by intuition and a call from the dolphins. Was it a little risky? Did I question, what am I doing? A little bit of that. But again, the other incentive and the calling was so strong and so clear that I knew I had to do it. So once we arrive and he's helping everyone, prepare to get in their kayaks, he had told me actually as soon as he picked me up that, oh, by the way, I had to give up the other kayak to a couple that wanted, so now you have your own kayak. And that's when my heart dropped. And that's when I started negotiating with the dolphins. I said, listen, if this is so meant to be, and it's meant to be the most positive experience, then you have to help me get over this fear of being in my own kayak and venturing out like this. So I had several minutes when everyone else was getting ready. I had several minutes to just really focus, to choose. I remember so clearly. It took everything in me. But again, I was inspired, and something fun potentially was waiting for me, and I drew on that energy, and I just I tuned in to nothing but the most positive, powerful experience. And I reminded myself that I could transcend any limitation. Okay. Again, a lot of other work and practice had gone into this moment in my life, but here I was. Now we're out in the water, and he said, we may or may not see the pod of dolphins today, but let's go enjoy the seas and the skies in the meantime. We get to a point, and I hear several people start saying, oh, dolphins over here, and they're gesturing out in the distance. So let's say it was to my left, okay, out in the distance to my left. And I thought, okay, I can't rush myself. First time putting these flippers on, putting, the snorkel, the mask, etc. I'm going to take my time. So I took my time, got in the water, and I'm still adjusting things. And everyone had already started taking off in this other direction. As I'm preparing myself, I look down and I notice the shadow of something like deep, deep in the water. It looked like a big fish. And I became a little curious. So I put my mask on and I put my head underwater. And something, Lisa, something took over. Something took over my entire being. It's almost like now I was given instruction to keep my arms alongside my body, basically not to use them for swimming, to like just hold them to the side of my body, and to swim like a fish. So I started following that shadow. I'm still looking down, and I'm mesmerized. I'm like off to the right. Everyone else was off to the left. And then before I knew it, I look up and I'm right in the middle of a pod of 24 plus dolphins. I mean, they were everywhere around me.
Mm.
And I remember this surreal feeling, this awareness of I have entered another world. I was transported. So I'm not an expert on like the details of about like the dolphin sonar, and I'm not a spokesperson on understanding those creatures in a very biological way, but I do know that they have a sonar and they emit. What they emit creates this most blissful environment. And I was in it. I was immersed in it. I became it. And so we're swimming along, and I'm looking around, my eyes, I see big ones and small ones, and the mommy with its baby, and we're just swimming along. And then I started seeing one of them begin to surface. And I thought, oh, it's going to take its breath. This is it. This is my moment. As soon as that thought came into my brain, my rational thinking kicked back in just like that. And I thought, oh my goodness, when was the last time I took a breath? So then I'm like almost gasping for air. And I surfaced, took a breath, saw the dolphin leap and come back into the water. And just like that, they were gone. I lost momentum.
That's powerful.
What happened next, and I'm going to keep that part really very brief, but that's why I'm sharing this particular experience, because when I lost momentum with them, I had a chance. Now I'm above water, and I looked around, Lisa, and I was smack in the middle of the ocean. When they picked me up, we were still at shore practically. And now I'm in the middle of the ocean with no landmark in sight, nothing, only the big deep blue underneath me and the big blue sky above. And in that split second, I just knew I could either go to fear or not. I could not indulge with like an in between. And then I still felt the after effects of being with them in that energy field. So I was predisposed to make that choice maybe a little bit more easily. And I remember just like floating on my back, looking up at the sky and going, I put out a prayer and I said, I'm going to take a few seconds to breathe, and then I'm going to start swimming, and it's going to be the right direction. And that's all there is to it. And that's what happened. I started swimming. But to have covered that distance underwater without breathing is a miracle. Now, if in that realm, in that energy field that, the dolphins exist in, if it's normal for them to swim that distance before they have to take a breath, then I joined their world. But in my world, it was a miracle. So I started swimming, and a few minutes later, I see the guide waiting for me, and the rest of the story is becomes another story. But basically, I was saved. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. In letting me like dwell on some of these memories and details. But again, the power of choice, the power of choice.
Yes. Oh, that's so powerful, that story. And similar to how you handled being in the bomb shelter, in a sense, except for the fact that when you had to shine your light and open up a line, focus, and shine, which we'll get to in a little bit, you had just had this magical, mystical experience. I also reread that part of your book this morning, and I just love the humor that you put in, kind of as a thread in all of that, about the kayak man and how he morphed into he morphed into Mr. Changed Our Contract kayak man, then to Mr. Completely Outraged kayak man when he was flailing his arms trying to get your attention when he spotted you.
He was so upset with me.
Oh my gosh, then to Mr. Sitting Cross-Armed kayak man. And after swimming all that time in the right direction, you were able to lift yourself up into the kayak. I just can't imagine, Iva. And, also what struck me was your ability, as you call it, to use cosmic power recovery, CPR, cosmic
Yes,
power recovery.
I forgot about that. Yes.
That's amazing. And
It's, yeah.
and in spite of it all, you got back to where you came from and had this experience that you'll cherish for the rest of your life.
And there's still something that is yet to come back to me in memory of that experience. I've been informed, and I have also felt that there is something I experienced in addition to all of this that day in the swim with the dolphins that will be revealed to me when the time comes. And I feel that part of the reason that I tell this story, maybe more often than some of the others, is because there's something in me that wants to come into that revelation. So maybe the more I talk about it, the more, it's this like speaking of reliving. I want to remember what else happened.
And I think you will.
So
I have no doubt. Well, that's phenomenal. Is there anything more you want to share on that before we head to another question here? We're getting close to the end, but I do have one more question I wanted you to focus on, your open up, align, focus, and shine. But before we go to that, is there anything more about this magical experience with the dolphins that is coming to you that you'd like to share with the audience? Because this is a very powerful story, Iva.
there's so much we can talk about.
Let me just say one thing. Another thing that struck me as I was reading that portion of your book. The night before, you were talking about the 9 mirrors or 9 muses in your apartment. And it was as if those mirrors facilitated something for you, kind of like a hall of mirrors, a reckoning, something that got you prepared. That's just my thought.
Well, part of the one of my goals for that trip to Kihei, along with the practice of breath, was to let go of any interference that was coming to me on self-image. Many of us have just things we kind of grow into and grow out of, and so that was an element at that point in my life. And I realized that I cannot make the progress that I want to make and be a transparent advocate for this positive message if I'm not simultaneously really growing up myself and getting over some of these things that were getting in the way, and some aspects of self-image were in the way. So I thought, okay, let's take care of this. Come on, checklist. Let's just keep moving through. Let's get to the other side and stay there. I want a light-filled mind and nothing short of that. So that was part of my goal. So you talk about cosmic humor. I, from a distance, before I left in Bloomington at the time, had reserved this little apartment for a month, family owned. And the first day I walk in, it's a tiny little place, like a small bedroom, small living room, just the right size, kitchen, almost like a little more than a studio space. That freaking place had 9 mirrors in it. Everywhere I looked, there was a mirror. And immediately, I remember crying and smiling at the same time, because it's like, you want to get over self-image. You want to be able to look at yourself in the mirror with nothing but eyes of beauty reflecting the amazing, the glory of the universe. Here, take 9 mirrors. So yes, it did prepare me to answer your question.
I would say,
Yeah.
you looked at yourself in the mirror and you saw yourself as a superwoman. Otherwise, you couldn't have given yourself CPR, cosmic power recovery.
Oh, I saw a lot of things, but then I started making a choice. Which one do I really want to see? And then the more I fine-tuned and finessed my choice, that's the only thing I started to see. So yes.
That is very powerful. I mean, to let go of those identities of weakness, frailty, impoverishment, or whatever, all of these identities that we talk ourselves into thinking that's who we are. Not that
or that life,
yeah.
kind of puts you in a place. Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
We have those experiences, we have those impressions, and then for a short while, you almost have to make them your allies,
Mm.
you know, to really bring in the creativity and the courage, and to draw on the resources, and to know where to ask for help. I mean, it's a big project, but welcome to planet Earth.
I so agree with that. Before I can let go of something, I do have to make it my ally. I have to love it.
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's very powerful.
At least acknowledge it, because I know you and I may or may not have had as harsh of experiences as some other people. I don't know. And it's not necessarily that we need to sit and compare, but I'm not assuming that everyone who is in pain or has had a harsh experience can so easily say, oh, I'm going to love this. However, at the same time, I will encourage the simplicity that goes into that. And I will say, yes, it's almost like open up to that reality that says, you will get through this. Love what has been given you, and then learn how to go to that neutral space and experience the response that then comes from within, the inner wisdom, from the beyond guidance, and so on and so forth. It's a huge conversation, but that's the gist of it.
Right. And that's a perfect segue into essentially the second to last question I wanted to ask you. How are you able to help others open up, your open up, align, focus, shine, your magic carpet? Expand on that for us.
Well, if I haven't made this point by now already, I'll say that the first and most important way that I help others is by being it myself. That's the whole point. That's why I wrote my memoir. That's why I'm here with you today, to be a testimonial and to practice what I preach and teach. So the first part of the answer is become that which I want for the world. How many times have we heard variations of that paraphrased beautiful quote, right? And over the years, I've developed my skills and abilities in pure service to others. And when I was completing my book, in the middle of the night, one night, after a very, very powerful mystical experience, I received what I've coined since then. It's a template, and I have it listed on the back cover of my book. Open up, align, focus, shine. Actually, it's choose, open up, align, focus, and shine. But the tagline, so to speak, is just open up, align, focus, and shine, because choosing is in every piece of that. Choosing goes without saying. You have to be available to show up, to decide, to commit. And then after enough commitment and follow through, you become, so choice is no longer needed. You are in it. So open up basically is igniting a mindset of unforeseen, remarkable realities, being open, curious to things beyond the norm, beyond current identity, beyond limited memories, just to keep it in context of what we've talked about, opening up. aligning, where you're simultaneously listening to inner wisdom, learning how to listen to inner wisdom if that listening is still interrupted, and voices from beyond, whether it's beyond you, just like listening to wise mother or a good friend, or we're talking now about channeling listening. And if you're of a particular faith or lifestyle, it's your communion with God, or what inspires you and speaks to you. But even that requires education and practice and follow through. So the alignment is listening to inner wisdom in alignment with what's coming through. So from within, from without. Focus. Boy, like we all can vouch for this one. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. And I don't want to keep saying these days, but really, these days especially, we have so much going on in our countries and with nature and our personal lives. And there's a lot. And plus, we have the temptations of technology and all of these gadgets and tools that can be used well, but they can also be misused. So focus, like to be able to focus, to choose to focus by divorcing contradictions and distractions, that's crucial piece of this template. So now we have open up, align, focus. Now we're creating an identity and a mindset and an existence and a response system that says shine. And at the level that I'm reaching for with shine is forging cutting edge reform and generating new traditions. These are not just words. This is a mission statement. This is a dream. This is a commitment to be part of cutting edge reform and generating new traditions based on ancient wisdom. It's not reinventing the wheel, and it's not disacknowledging the beauty that brought us to this point. But anyway, so you get the idea. So first, showing up, choosing. Choice in and of itself is a miracle. The ability for us to be able to make a choice, just that whole process. You and I talking right now, and the listeners with us, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. We are phenomenal beings with infinite potential. Let's keep using it. Open up, align, focus, shine. The alchemy of this, I'm calling it template right now. I'll share a secret with you. And I talk about it, allude to it in my book, is my magic carpet. That's the magic carpet. It becomes the mindset. It becomes what you use to travel on in life. And it takes you to places beyond imagination. You know, Lisa, all the stories we share, all these experiences, where do they come from? So that's the summary. And I hope this answers your question.
It does. And I wrote a note when I read your book that to expand just slightly on open up, align, focus, shine is the magic carpet. I love your quote in your book that you state that the flying magic carpet is our mind.
Mm-hmm.
The flying magic carpet is our mind. That's how powerful we are.
And I'm going to like indulge here for taking an extra minute to make a comment on the word mind. A lot of times, most of the time, I even sometimes slip and use it this way. But usually mind, like someone will say mind and they'll point to their head, right? Like brain, mind. And what came to me years ago so clearly, and I did the best I could in how I presented this idea in my book, and I continue to do it, in the work that I do with clients and whatnot, is that mind is all that we are. It's your body, it's your spirit, it's your ancestors with you, it's the angels that show up, it's your biology, it's your emotions, anything that makes you who you are, the perspective that you see, the way you see the world and move through it is your mind. I think of it as like this big sphere that's around you. You're in this huge sphere that goes in every direction, multidimensional sphere. That is your mind. So when we say mind over matter, in certain moments, when you draw on your mind over matter, you might have, let's say, Archangel Michael with you, or you might have the whispers from, wisdom that your father shared with you, or you might have just your own rational thinking, or you might have the lightness in your body because you ate really well, or you might have a little bit of, bloating because you ate something that, so in that moment, that's your mind. What you are seeing is your mind.
Wow. I that's powerful.
And that's the so the flying magic carpet is the mind. That's what, like it triggered this response from me, that we're talking about the entire identity and what creates it. And then when you go into this beautiful alignment and work on the harmony of all things that make you who you are, it's magical.
Wow, the entire identity and what creates it. Well, that beautifully segues into the next question before we get to your services that are also going to be available on your website if people want to go there. I always like to ask people I interview, if you were to imagine, visualize, and create any dream for society, what would your dream be, Iva?
One that brings it all together and brings all the other little dreams together. There are lots of them. I'd, I'd say it has to be that our minds at their highest resonance create miracles. Honestly, it's everything that I just shared
Wow.
about, like the application of the template. Our minds, now I understand a little bit more of why I went on that segue in talking about how I define mind. Our minds at their highest resonance, maybe at their harmonious resonance, whatever collection of energies and information that it takes to create that harmony, when we are in that, we are miracles and we literally create miracles, to the extent that then miracles don't have the same title anymore. Because right now we deem something miraculous because it is something that seems so unusual to the norm. But then when you change the rules of the norm and you apply the tenets of what made that thing a miracle, now you're in it and it becomes normal. Okay, conceiving a baby, creating a baby, and looking at a pregnant woman, is that miraculous? Right? But we've become so used to it. We still celebrate, and in the moment when someone announces, there's usually, it's a very happy moment for most people. But then, the next day that, when you're in the grocery store walking past a pregnant woman, you're just focused on like where you're going to find, organic brown rice on the shelf. You're not thinking, oh, it's such a miracle. This woman is pregnant. We become used to it. We've integrated that miracle. It becomes more familiar. So my dream is that we continue to move in resonance with the tenets, the principles, the environments that we deem miraculous, that we set a new norm together. So that's my dream.
Wow. I keep saying, wow, I don't know what other word to use. It's so interesting that that's your dream. I pulled that out, one of your quotes out, that our minds at their highest resonance create miracles, in my introduction of you. The listener may remember. So we've come full circle, and you've wrapped it up so beautifully with that same powerful message. Our minds at their highest resonance create miracles. So let's go to the last topic of this interview, Iva, and share with us some of the services that you provide for those that are interested in working with you. And, before you go into that, I just want to share with the listeners that you got a wonderful boost, in a sense, or a wonderful boost of credibility, let's say, from Elizabeth Gilbert when she mentioned you, not by name, I understand, but mentioned you as a friend in her book, that you had a bat phone to the universe.
Like, every time I hear this, it goes. Yes, Liz did coin that
It's so
title.
awesome.
Oh, she's so funny. So yes, apparently, I can't take full credit for having the bat phone to the universe. Apparently, I have access to some of it. So the bat phone to the universe is it's service that I provide. I don't call it bat phone to the universe. Okay, so this is what I
I think you
I
should, Iva.
you think so?
There's so much in one just short little snippet.
Kind of get that niche of the market, create a few
Yeah,
bat
for someone
phones.
that grew up on Batman and Robin, I had this big crush on Robin.
For someone who's not familiar, as familiar with that, superhero, I had to do a little explaining to a few people, like a few elders. They go, "What does bat phone to the universe mean? Why is that so special?"
He had that bat phone in his cave. It was just awesome. A big red bat phone.
Oh my goodness. I'll have to check in with Liz after this interview and just thank her. I thank her all the time for so many things. Just a beautiful soul and a wonderful friend. Anyway, so my services, I am available. I do intuitive readings, basically receive messages and deliver them. I call it the Universal Postal Service instead of the United States Postal Service. Receive messages. I have grown and polished myself as a seer over the years. I have very high standards for myself in what I see and why, and how I deliver. And my passion, not just passion, but it's a very important thing, is I also educate the ones receiving if they're not already in that understanding themselves, how to receive, because the whole how we receive and deliver, I mean, how I receive, deliver, and how it's relayed and applied is just as important as the original information. And there's the tendency to have a lot of interpretation and sometimes misinterpretation, which is normal. But anyway, I focus on the quality of how that information is shared and applied. And then there's follow through, where someone wants that follow through, which sometimes goes into mentoring. So that's can be a longer term experience. It gives a little bit more substance and time, if nothing else, to the process. And I also teach classes. And all of these services can be applied one-on-one or in a group setting. So I teach classes, for example, one of my signature classes, Dialogue with the Divine, wireless communication. So basically it's empowering individuals to how to open up, basically open up a line, focus, shine, coming to think of it, and how to receive their own information and how to trust it and what to make of it. So it's a very delicate and can be a fun process, has its grueling moments because we get a lot of obstacles out of the way when we decide to open up this way. And then, classes and groups along the lines of quantum entrainment, like really bringing in the language, the technology of love, and how to step into a little bit more of the fusion between like quantum science and theology and so on and so forth. So in that realm. And then I occasionally, I'm available as an officiant for ceremonies. And bonus in all of that are conversations on health and nutrition. I am not a nutritionist. This is not a professional, like paid service. But it's one of my strongest callings in this life, is to be a voice and a vessel and an example of light-filled and plant-based options as a lifestyle, and why. And it ties into the focus and shine aspect of the template, to be clean and available and in harmony. And then I love to encourage others to write their own stories. And on the side, I've helped review and edit a few manuscripts, again, not from professional training, but from a very, my meticulous nature when it comes to words and accuracy of expressing ideas. And just from my personal experience, I tend to be recruited for that sometimes. And that's pretty much it for now. I'm reachable. So I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, Iva, this has been such a miraculous time with you today. I know the listeners have enjoyed it. I want to thank you for opening up, aligning, focusing, and shining with us. Open up, align, focus, and shine. You did that. You were a template for it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for showing us how to soar along with you on your magic carpet to a life of miracles and wizardry. And thank you to all of you listening and joining us as we imagine, visualize, and create our dreams for society. It is, as Iva said, challenging times right now, but we can always change our perspective and create miracles in our lives, as Iva has demonstrated and shared with us. And I want to also share what Martin Luther King said: the time is always right to do what is right. So I'll add to that by saying the time is always right to share our dreams. And please comment below and share your dreams with us. And thank you for being you. And again, tune in to part 1, recorded on January 28th, where Iva interviewed me about my journey from lawyering, lobbying stress to blogging, coaching bliss, creating dreams for society, and my coaching practice, Dreams for You Coaching. And make sure you tune into part 3, if you will, that we will record next Thursday on February the 11th. Iva and I are planning to share miracle stories with you in this conversation that include instantaneous healing and physical manifestations. I know you'll really enjoy that third segment. I think it will be the golden capstone to our 3-part series. And as a special offer, Iva and I are offering to you that if you let us know by emailing us that you listen to one or more of our 3-part series and share with us which one of the many stories spoke to you most, we'll give you a discount on our services. So with that, until next time, love and joy.